Well, it's more than the state of the nation, it's the state of the globe. Sam Tsima and, of course, Nick Binedell are here to talk to us about the state of the globe. Nick, you've recently been to Europe, you travel to Europe extensively. It's broken, but the rest of the world, and surprisingly, parts of the world are actually very vibrant, very alive. Are we succeeding as South Africa in aligning ourselves properly with them?
Well, I think the facts speak for themselves. Our biggest partner is China, and that's an enormous change in the past few years. Recently, the Prime Minister of Britain was here. The data with Britain, our trade with Britain has dropped 40% in the last few years. So clearly we're moving eastwards to these developing economies. I'm not sure I'd agree that Europe is broken, but we are under pressure in the developed Atlantic economies, the US and Europe in particular.
But are we successfully enough aligning ourselves with this decade's winners? If we look at Latin America, we look at Brazil, we look at, I don't know, Turkey, for example.
You see, the history of our economy is very Eurocentric. So our thinking, our practices, our history all focus on Europe and the States. And of course, as the power shifts, we need to raise the game to look at Latin America, look at Africa particularly, and look at Asia.
But you've been talking about this for the last decade. You've been sort of drawing attention to the fact that we need to be doing this. We've kind of a bit of a late starter.
Yeah, we are, but we are a very internationally minded country because we're so isolated. South Africa's a bit of an island, really. And I think our executives travel a lot, and I'm noticing in groups I work with that more and more of them have traveled to more and more regions of the world.
Are we doing it adequately?
We could do it better, and I think this is the future game. So, I mean, that's what we're about at GIBS, is to try and broaden that awareness. Our companies have done well. South Africa has produced global companies in the last 15 years, and no other country of our size has done it at the same scale. So we have in evolutionary biology, there's a very interesting term I came across recently. It's allopatric speciation. And what it means, other fatherland specialization. I think our companies have sort of got isolated from the Western tradition. They were South African focused in the colonial era. They built an inward industrial economy. When the barriers came down, they went outwards with a lot of drive. Look at SAB Miller. It's an extraordinary story. It's repeated in a number have failed, but it's a particular form of thinking that comes out of our history. It's frontier-like, it's go-get-'em, it's a generalist, quick action group of companies.
And that's the good outward look, Sam. But at the same time, when we look inwardly at South Africa, we got, how do politicians put it, challenges.
Yeah, we're very hard on ourselves. South Africans are quite very critical of themselves, and that's, I find that as a strength. But we do have some obvious challenges. I mean, I had discussion with somebody yesterday as to how do we achieve this social cohesion that is actually almost like a prerequisite for us to start perfecting our leadership styles. We're not leading in a vacuum. You know, we are part of a society that is very dynamic, and that almost demands more. And for me, we need leadership. We need leadership in all its form. And I think we're also facing a situation where the world requires a lot from us. We have demonstrated in many ways how we can come out of worse conflicts and define the new order.
I get the sort of sense that we're sitting on a tinderbox because we've got a global economic situation that is desperately uncertain. Week to week the news changes and the mood changes as well. One worries, though, if the globe goes into a double-dip recession. One looks at the political change in the north of Africa, which some analysts are now saying is spreading south. Malawi, for example, recently has seen some very severe sort of action on political action, sort of grassroots action there as well. We're sitting in South Africa with a very unequal society, with a leadership vacuum, and we don't seem to be really realizing that the winds of change perhaps are coming, to quote that nice Mr. McMillan.
I was one of those people who thought that was really far-fetched, and then you mentioned Malawi. I'm really becoming concerned. But I do believe that our situation is very different. I do believe that we have a society which is becoming critical of its leadership, is demanding the leadership to do things. And we are talking about the issues. We haven't bottled anything. And that to me is fundamental in looking for solutions. I mean, we just listen to all the debates in the radios, be either 702 or one of the vernacular radio stations. People are really debating. So that to me if that can be taken very, very seriously and be packaged, like we do here at GIBS, where people come and address us and we debate about it, people feel good about it, especially when you engage with the government officials, they do acknowledge that they have a problem. The question is, how do we actually take the solutions to the public? I find South Africans debating a lot about problems and suggestions, but they don't debate about how can we connect.
We're not getting the solutions. Alcoholics Anonymous apparently tell us that the first sort of step towards healing is admitting that you have a problem. So we admit we've got a problem. That's wonderful. But if we're not going to take action to address the problem, Nick, we've got a bigger problem.
Well, there's a structural challenge, which is that the state and business and civil society have become somewhat fragmented from each other in the post-94 era. And I think what Sam's referring to, and I agree with him, there's an energy coming from the bottom to say, guys, we can do better than this. But there's what I think is interesting about your question is maybe the world is becoming as dynamic as South Africa. Right? We've lived in this kind of turbulent environment for decades and decades. So there's a hardness, there's a resilience here that I think is quite powerful. So if, as Sam is saying, we're pushing a bit of pressure upwards, if we get response from the top, we're going to have a very interesting outcome. I do worry about the state because I think the state seems particularly brittle and doesn't seem to be able to be efficient at the rate it should, and doesn't, the planning commissions are trying to give us a strategy. It's not all there yet. Some way to go. Business needs to be far more engaged in this debate, in my view.
It's beginning to get more engaged, and that is encouraging, but it sort of comes in bursts. There isn't a cohesive driving force because big business, quite frankly, seems to be a little bit scared of stepping on toes.
But is business united? If you look at how many structures we have.
Completely.
I don't want to talk about Busa, but let's just go below Busa and look at the structures. Are they talking to each other, or are they just waiting for a time when they get together at Busa and say, we are now together? I mean,
what I think the interesting question is what's at stake? Not only for the country, not only for the people, but also for business. And I would argue, I'm sure Sam would agree, there's an enormous amount at stake. We have a vested interest. What's the value of a company? Well, it's its assets and its products and its turnover and so on. But actually the value of a company depends on having a country. And a country depends on having prosperous, spending consumers who feel happy and good about the future.
And at that point, we'll leave it. Sam Tsima and Nick Binedell, both from the faculty at GIBS.